on and look forward to a powerful conversation on today. Are you with us, Doc?
I'm here. I'm here. Thank you so much.
Outstanding, outstanding, outstanding. Well, we're glad to have you today, and we look forward to our conversation. Let me get this out of our way. Excellent, excellent. All right, very good. So welcome, welcome, and we're glad to have you. And we will get right into some of these good questions that we have for you today. And so you grew up in Camden, New Jersey, and part of that time, I think you mentioned that you were in part of the time in public school, mostly in Adventist schools, and up until you went to Pine Forge Academy,
Mhm.
which was a great experience, I'm sure, for you. And so the question I have for you is, how was it growing up in the city of Camden, New Jersey? I've had a few friends who lived in that area, grew up in that area, from that area. So how was that, and how did you see yourself as you grew up as a Christian, an emerging black man in the Camden, New Jersey area?
Well, first of all, Dr. Nas, I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I am humbled to be a part of this platform and to share a little bit of my story.
Yes.
Yes, I'm originally from Camden, New Jersey. Um, I would say that um, the majority of my time growing up was not necessarily spent in the city um, besides church. I had the privilege of my schooling being in private schooling, uh, Seventh Day Adventist schools, and so a lot of my interactions, a lot of my time was in kind of a cocoon, and so I was a church boy. And so, one of the things that I often like to say is that our family had a singing ministry, and it would sing all around the Allegheny East Conference. And so, I've had a chance to sing uh, uh, during the General Conference in Toronto some years back. I had a chance to sing in the General Conference building when I was younger.
How
We had
about
our
that?
family ministry sang there, and so I've had a diversity of experiences. But God has been with me and my family. I'm so thankful for loving parents, committed parents. Although we didn't have a lot of money, they made a commitment that I would have access to Christian education. And so a lot of my experience, I would say, was shaped not necessarily in Camden per se, but by my experiences through church. And another connection, a California connection. Tasha Smith, who is a big time movie star and is in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Perry
Right. She always got the
movies and things like
attitude.
that.
Right. She always got the
Right.
attitude.
So she is a first cousin of the major family in our church. And so
Oh wow.
when I was a student at Pine Forge, figuring out what I wanted to do, I had the opportunity to go to California for something called the Sunscreen Festival, which is a Adventist movie festival. But when I got there, she picked me up. And
Wow.
so she was a struggling artist at the time. And so she poured into me at that time. I also, when I was growing up, I had a person by the name of Ty Tribbett. He was I met him just after he had recorded in the Prince of Egypt album.
Oh
He's from
wow. Yeah.
Camden,
Yeah.
and so my dad had helped to facilitate a community almost kind of block party gospel concert in one of the major parks in the city. And so our family sang and opened up for Ty Tribbett
How
and
about
Greater
that?
Anointing. And then he had offered me an opportunity to sit in on his rehearsal. So on every Tuesday night after 8 o'clock, we would go to his rehearsals. And I talk about Tasha and Ty not from the standpoint that I became a musician, but from the standpoint that it showed me excellence, exposed me to Black excellence,
Amen.
and to what discipline it took to be excellent. And I take a lot in particular from Ty as everyone kind of thinks that he kind of dances around and is very kind of
Animated.
energetic and animated, but every step he makes is on purpose.
Hmm.
And so I remember he would stop a concert, he would stop a rehearsal with his choir and say, "You didn't get the step right."
Wow.
And so you would think that, oh, everyone's just kind of moving and doing
Yeah.
their thing. No, he had a particular discipline to it. So I know that you probably didn't ask for all of that, but I think that
That's
kind
good
of
stuff. Yeah.
shapes my when I think about my childhood in Camden. Those are some of the things that come to my mind.
Yeah, but that's good. That's good to know. We were talking in the time before the show started, and you didn't mention that. I'm sure you wanted to spring that on me. But I was just watching Tasha. Oh my! Last week, we had Thanksgiving and everything, so you take a little time to watch those movies. I watched Jump the Broom. What is it
Okay,
called?
yeah.
Jumping the Broom. Yeah, Jumping the Broom all
Mhm.
over again,
Right.
and she's always right there doing her thing, and actually she had less of an attitude in that one probably than any of the other
And the other
any
ones,
of the
yeah.
other roles. So that was interesting. So and then of course Ty Tribute who just has so much energy and has. I love how people, and I'll get into this a little bit more. I love how people uh, understand who they are and then walk it out. Kind
Yeah.
of find their place and their niche and just kind of walk it out. And I think Tasha did that. I think Tiffany Haddish did that. I think that Kirk Franklin did that. Back in the was it late mid '90s really, early to mid '90s when he was finding his way, and I think Ty Tribbett did that, and so I really appreciate that, and that's also something that you did, finding your place, finding your voice, and so that leads me to the next question. That is, how did you decide that higher education or higher educational leadership was the thing for you? How did you make that decision, and how did you know?
So in my junior year at Oakwood University, I had started a organization called the Progressive Black Caucus, and our focus
Now
was
wait a minute. Now
on.
why did you start that organization?
Yeah. So we started the organization. Some people would have said because I lost the election for vice president of the student government in my junior year, in
Okay.
my sophomore year,
Uh huh.
and so, but I still thought it was important to expose the student body to some of the needs of our community outside of Oakwood. I felt like Oakwood was kind of a bubble in which we kind of dealt with issues that happened on campus, or we would do missionary work, right? But we weren't really thinking about social justice. I didn't have the language of social justice then, but we weren't really thinking about social justice issues on campus. And so I started this group called the Progressive Black Caucus. And out of that, I got on the president at the time. I got on his radar, Dr. Delbert Baker. And so he invited me to sit in on one of the board meetings. And why that was such a key and strategic moment was because only the student government president was invited to sit in the only student that was invited to sit in on board meetings, given that we're a private institution. but I was able to glean and learn and kind of sit back and see how he managed the room. And after that, I said, I want to be a college or university president.
Sign me up.
and 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 so what one of the things that was amazing going into my senior year was that I didn't know what kind of degree would help me do that, but I knew that I need to go further to get a degree. And as I was doing my own research, I found out that you could get a degree in student affairs and higher ed. So to me, that was amazing. I don't know if that's amazing to you, but it was amazing to me that you could get essentially a degree in supporting students. And
Right.
so I pursued my master's in with an emphasis in student affairs, and then a doctorate in higher education leadership at Auburn University.
Outstanding, outstanding. Yeah, I actually share that same degree. I have a, PhD in higher education leadership as well, and so it's interesting how for the Christian, the person in Christ, a loss is never a loss.
Yeah.
It's only gain because all things are working together for my gain
Yeah.
and my good. So
Mm-hmm.
a setback is really a setup, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think, kind of that's what happened to you, and you got that exposure at just the right time. So you kind of grew up in and around Camden, and had these experiences in inner cities and more urban areas. And then you matriculated through your educational experiences at Pine Forge and Oakwood and Auburn. And then and also Tuskegee working. And then you arrive at Moscow, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Moscow, Idaho. Now, I mean, I didn't even know there was a Moscow, Idaho until probably a couple of years ago. I think I was doing a
Mm-hmm.
paper or something on the University of Idaho, and or looking at some research, and I discovered it was Moscow, Idaho. So so that just sounds foreign. It sounds like an unfamiliar place, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like a red line, a red zone. It sounds like we
Yeah.
shouldn't be there as black people, right? So I would
Yeah.
ask you, and you live in Moscow proper, yes?
Yes.
Uh huh. Which is
Not only do I live in Moscow, but I also live on campus. So I
okay.
live on campus with our students.
Oh, okay. All right. Right on campus. Wow. So you live in Moscow. So I would ask you the question, what's the best and the worst part of living in rural Idaho? Moscow.
So I would say the best thing is that I live in splendid isolation.
uh,
The worst thing is that I live in
in
splendid
splendid isolation.
isolation. And getting back to the best thing is that we live in a picturesque environment. It
Yes.
is when you walk out the door, you see
Beautiful.
the hills, you see the mountains. I think anywhere else it would be kind of considered almost like a resort town beauty, just a natural beauty, untouched out here. So that is wonderful. It provides a great place to write because you're not inundated with a lot of kind of
Stimuli.
the distractions that you would have in kind of bigger metropolitan areas, and you can accomplish a lot while you're kind of off the grid. And so we are almost 6 hours away from Boise, so we're closer to the Canadian border. So we're on the northern part. There our closest city is Spokane, Washington, which is about an hour and a half or
Mm.
so north. But major city is 5 hours. That's 5 hours away. Is Seattle, right? So we can go to Seattle, or 6 hours to Portland, Oregon. So some of if you would say some of the other challenges is that there's less than 1%. The population is less than 1% Black. And so, if you're looking for a Black community, we're just kind of nurturing that and growing that. And this in my 6 year, I'm in my 6 year now, and so
Mm-hmm.
we're just kind of building that with a small critical mass that's there. And a lot of times you're kind of deemed invisible, and the minority. We are the minority of the minorities. So let me give you for instance, like if we were in Oakland, for instance, at a university or school in Oakland or San Francisco, we would African Americans, if African Americans on a campus, right? Generally, either we would be the primary minority or the secondary. It would go kind of in between the Latinx community and us. Well, on this campus, we have to go through to get things done. We have to go through the Latinx community and the Native community. And so
Wow.
it creates a different dynamic
It
where you're
does.
used to
It
coming
does.
from an activist kind of background. Like, why do I have to go through
Right.
other populations to get done what we need to get done?
Right.
And so it creates an interesting dynamic on how tribalism works within kind of a isolated environment like this that has not experienced Blackness, particularly American descendants of slaves or African American uh,
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
Yeah, that is an interesting dynamic because, in a lot of places, as you said, blacks are like the default minority, you
Mhm.
know, and just being a larger part of the population, but that's just not the case in your situation. So, very good. So, I came about, I was looking through your work and I came upon this article that talked about was May 12th of this year in profoundliving.com,
Mm.
and it was entitled Thriving in Unfamiliar Places. And of course, I
Yeah.
knew where you were and I knew what you were talking about. And when I read the article, it resonated with me. And as much as we'd like to be at the HBCU in Chicago, in St. Louis, in DC or DMV or Los Angeles, in various places and pockets where there are large numbers of black people, that is not always the case. And
Yeah.
so I thought that your experience could be instructive to us and helpful to us. And so, generally speaking, how do you, in the context of this article, how are you defining unfamiliar place? So, what does unfamiliar place mean?
So, a unfamiliar place is a space that is not native to you. It doesn't give you cues of familiarity or comfort or safety. It's a place in which you are not necessarily. It was not made for you, right? And
It sounds like you're
so,
talking about America.
right. But in my case, it's that on steroids.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Okay,
And
amazing.
if you don't mind, I would like to kind of go back. I know we mentioned Tuskegee, but I think that was a really formative experience um, working at Tuskegee. Uh, and so I serve as a director of a teaching and learning center there. Um, but that was in a small rural black environment.
Right.
And so what was interesting, I'm always asked kind of like, how was the different, that difference between moving from Tuskegee to moving to
Moscow.
Moscow, Idaho? And there are some similarities being in small rural towns uh, in many ways. Uh, Tuskegee is conservative in its own right, not necessarily politically conservative, but just being a historic kind of environment and a rural environment. I think in many ways prepared me for being at the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, and then having been at Pine Forge Academy for 4 years. In those formative years, being in kind of a rural out of the way high school. So even though I was born in Camden, New Jersey, went to school in Trenton, New Jersey, and then in Huntsville, Alabama. I have had kind of a mixture of experiences, both rural and in city environments.
Very good. And you kind of that kind of segues us nicely into the next question. So you worked at Tuskegee, you attended Auburn for your master's and doctorate, worked in Idaho, and so if you were talking to a student who's trying to make a decision about where to attend school, so what would you say are the major differences between HBCUs, higher historically black colleges, universities, and PWIs, or predominantly white institutions? The major differences, and how do they choose?
Right. So, for your audience, a historically black college and university are essentially are universities that were established uh, established to train and develop black people, and they have earned that designation before 1964, I believe, is when that the act came out. Um, but predominantly white institutions are institutions that were created with white people in mind, right? In education of white people in mind. And so I would say the specialness of HBCUs are that your foreparents and other black people over the years have created institutions with you in mind. With you in mind.
That's huge.
Whereas predominantly white institutions are institutions that they only value you to the point that you provide revenue for them. So let me give you two examples. One is your tuition. So black students coming and giving their tuition money to be at their institution. Two, athletics is another great example. And so we see that our student athletes are disposable at these institutions. We can find the top black students even in a Moscow, Idaho. We can find students in Florida and in Georgia and in LA. We can find the best talent to come here for that. But we say we struggle when we struggle to find top black academic talent. We struggle to find the top black professors and things. We can't find resources for that, but we can find resources for our students. And so I would say that although I work for a predominantly white institution, I recognize that I have to make a way out of no way on these campuses and fight for them to understand who I am. Whereas at a black institution, a historically black institution, they know who you are. And for most students, you have not had the opportunity to be around black excellence on a daily basis. And so I believe what was so important about it, Oakwood University or Tuskegee University, was that the president was black.
Yeah.
The teachers are black. And so you can see individuals that you could look up to, that looks like you, that sounds like you, but you can aspire to. And so I think I think historically black colleges and universities are unique organizations that prepare black students for life here in the United States, but actually even broader than that, for the world.
Awesome, awesome. And it should be noted too. Appreciate that history in the background.
I'm sorry for giving that, but I think you can see I have a bias in one way.
No, that's fine. I appreciate that. I appreciate that history and that background, HBCUs, and also it should be noted that in most areas, legal, medical, engineering, dentistry, HBCUs are still leading the way in preparing the majority of black professionals.
Veterinary medicine. So when I was at
That's
Tuskegee,
right.
I was assigned to the College of Veterinary Medicine, Nursing, and Allied Health,
Right.
and we produced over 75% of all all acting um, veterinarians
Right. Right.
and those who have retired. And so
Right.
when,
Yeah.
when there's a question about our relevance and
Right.
value, it is
Right.
there is contemporary relevance to
Sure.
what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. And so that stat is 60% of all, 70% of all, 83% of all. Right. So yeah, you cannot underestimate or diminish the value of HBCUs. So powerful, so important. So you mentioned fighting, and you're young. So that,
These gray hairs are not saying I'm that young, but I'll go with it. I'll go with
hey, that's the hey, that's
it.
that's that wisdom. That's that wisdom from doing all that writing and thinking you be doing. but but it may even be premature that betrays you. How about that? But my point is, you say that you fight. You have to fight. You have to fight. And so some people avoid unfamiliar places because they either sick of fighting or they don't want to
Right,
fight, right?
right, right.
So do you get tired of fighting? So is it and of course sociologists talk about this hypervigilance that we have to live in and walk in and reside in, right? And so how do you relate to the notion of waking up to fight, going bed thinking about fighting the next day? And what do you say to the person who's in that situation, contemplating that situation?
Yeah, and I would say that I'm in a unique place where because I don't live in a black urban space, there's very little release. So, for instance, when I walk out, my black sanctuary is my home, my wife and I. When I walk out the door, I have to be on 99.9% of the time because for most people in our community, um, now they know it's a smaller community. So some know who I am, or many know who I am, Dr. Freeman, around the kind of the community. Uh, but I'm on display, right? And so there is a hypervigilance around displaying what I would call black excellence, right? In different places. But there is a tiredness of fighting, and so I think that is um, where God and family comes in, right? I think God, family, and I would say a good therapist, a God, family, and a good therapist. So one of the things that I committed to this year is I was going frequently to a counselor, a white male counselor, but I needed to identify a black counselor. Not only did I want a black counselor, but I wanted a black counselor that was that was in a white rural area that knew kind of, because it's a different kind of thing. If I'm
Sure,
talking to
sure.
someone from
Yeah,
LA, for
yeah,
instance,
yeah.
right, their perspective and what they say, man, I'm going through too, and what they're going through in a different type of way.
Sure.
And so I've identified, I've been working with a counselor, particularly after the Black Lives Matter uh, and George Floyd situation kicked off. I knew that I needed to get a counselor, and I meet with them every 2 weeks and
Cool.
work through some issues. So besides prayer and having a great and loving wife, in
Yeah.
which we try to be a support for each other, I think a good therapist is always important.
Good. Good for you. So you got a white therapist, right? You said?
No, I have a black woman that is a therapist that is from Idaho.
From Idaho. Okay, so she understands.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank goodness, because a white male therapist telling you about how to how to be resilient as a black man in an unfamiliar space would be disastrous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a blessing. That's outstanding. So, what would you say? We talked about the difference between the HBCUs, and also I don't want to forget the point that you talked about the mental health. That's
Hmm.
important, I think, in times where we're experiencing the losses, and it seems like to me we've had just a bit of a reprieve from from the beatings and the killings of black folks for just a minute. Thank
Yeah.
God. But it seems like it's
Yeah.
just been a minute. And thankful and grateful for that. It happens to us so frequently, and we learn to live with it. Sometimes we don't even recognize when it hasn't, when it's not happening.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it becomes so much part of our everyday experience. But so we talked about HBCUs and what was good about them, but we know they're not perfect. so
Yeah.
so you've experienced two. And so
Yeah.
as you look about, as you look at them and think about your experiences, what would you say is the least attractive thing about the HBCU experience or environment?
I, I would say that not all HBCUs as a whole functions as sites of liberation and decolonization, as I like to call it,
Thank you.
right?
That's good.
And so there are times in which we even though we have black skin and created a black space, um, we allow um, white ideology and white kind of thinking to seep in and to shape the way in which we instruct and even navigate our world.
Sure.
And so I think that if you're looking for a perfect place for Black people, it's not necessarily HBCUs, but I feel like they are the best place given some of the challenges that are faced here in the country. It's just like black churches, right? And so we know that there's some challenges with black churches and all black institutions. That's why I'm also always talking about decolonizing the way that we're thinking about our organizations and institutions and even ourselves, because a lot of times our thinking is shaped by whiteness, and so I try to decenter whiteness are and when I say whiteness, I'm not just talking about white people. It is a way
Ah,
of worrying about what white people think,
yes. Yes.
right?
Sure.
And so in centering the way in which our people of centering our needs and our values.
All right, very good. And I like how you said that because, obviously all HBCs are not created equally. And I think that Oakwood was a good experience for me. However, I think I had one class, I think we had Negro in America back then or something like that.
Mm,
That was the only class where I learned. Now I could look on the building and discover that Eva B. Dykes was, by virtue of the history, one of the first black women to get a PhD in the country, right? So I could get that and then learn the stories based on the buildings and the other stories. But there was no programmatic, systematic approach to teaching and instruction that included the renowned ideological divide of Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, for instance, right? I did not learn that kind of theory, And so I didn't learn anything about Pan-Africanism, for instance, and
Right.
what that meant, and liberation theologies, right? And so that I wasn't exposed to that, but I prefer having a sacred place or space where I did not have to fight to belong.
Right. Right.
Even though I
Right.
wasn't
Right.
learning my history and theory, I didn't have to fight to belong. I didn't have to
Mhm.
justify my presence, and I didn't have to, live with this hypervigilance on a daily basis. And I believe that the 4 years of college ought to be the one time where we can come aside from the rampant racism that exists in our society and just focus on who we are and growing and learning and developing and potentially and possibly even meeting our spouses and developing relationships that will last for a lifetime.
Mhm.
So that was, I definitely agree with you. I had that experience, and I have friends who I will be friends with for till I see Jesus. And I met them right there on those hallowed in the hallowed campus of Oakwood University. So I thank God for that. So I want to move on a little bit. So in that article, you talk about being too black, coming off too black, and making sure that you present yourself as authentically and unapologetically black. So what do you mean?
Yes.
Because I think that too black and authentic and unapologetically probably means different things to different black people. So what does it
Right.
mean to
Right.
you, and what does it mean to maintain who you are authentically and unapologetically in this white and unfamiliar space that you find yourself in?
I think this is a very important question because to your point of it, different people seeing those terms differently. I always like to acknowledge that I am where I am because there are some people that had to make sacrifices for me to do it. So I
Sure.
used to say, well, I didn't have to shuck and jive, or I didn't have essentially that what some young people are saying, I'm not my grandparents, right? But I believe that I stand on their shoulders, right?
Sure.
So some of them had to make compromises. They had to make compromises that now position me to be where I am. So I have to acknowledge that one of the reasons why I am at the University of Idaho was that at the timing of my hiring, I was hired during in the fall. I was hired in the fall of 2015. That's a strategic time because Barack Obama was still president at the time. And so there was a culture around, we need to diversify. We need to have black people. And if we can get Sidney Freeman, if we can get Linda Freeman, let's try to make a run at this. I'm talking about the institution.
Sure.
And so I was able to come in at a time where people were kind of open to that, right? And so the way that I'm talking to you right now, right, is the way that I talk to white people. I don't what I mean
Wait a
it
minute,
by
wait a minute. You
code
don't change. You
switching.
don't change. Your voice doesn't get higher. You mean?
It doesn't get higher. It doesn't get softer. It does not. I
You
come with
still move your
all of
hands. You still
this.
move your hands.
I come with all of who I am.
Hey,
And
listen.
so
You
and
got white women in Idaho, in Moscow, Idaho, that are clenching their pearls every day. A 6 foot man with locks coming up at him, dark skin, and you're aggressive and you're moving your hands when you talk, and they clutching their pearls, man.
well, they just gonna have to clutch them, but they need to. But one of the things, but I am able to do that,
Yeah.
right? Because there are others that came before,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so when I say that I come off authentically black, that means something to there. There's not just one type of black, right? But what I'm saying is that I try to operate with freedom, um, and I want to give props to Pine Forge Academy in Pennsylvania, a historically black boarding academy, which was a part of the Underground Railroad. I want to give props to that school because although there are some haters that may call us arrogant, but I think it provided us with the environment and with support in such a way that we know who we are, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel like I was less than anybody going anywhere. And so between having, so you imagine how Adventists are, and then you put me in an environment like Pine Forge Academy, and then to Oakwood, where it really was a place that helped to shape and mold me and let me know who I was. Going to a Auburn University, I didn't know I was supposed to think less of myself. It was like I didn't know, I knew what Harvard was, I knew what Yale was, but I didn't know that I was supposed to feel like I was less than. I felt like you didn't go to Pine Forge, you didn't go to Oakwood, like that's the school. I mean, so those places allowed me leadership opportunities so that I could lead in my own freedom and in my own voice. And so I think people are just kind of, in some ways, they're kind of amazed that I feel comfortable doing that. And then being able to interact with the president, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to, so I feel comfortable. Like I just negotiated on our campus. I was in a conversation with three of us, our chief diversity officer, our president, and myself. We hadn't had a Black Cultural Center on campus for about 45 years. There was this gap. And so I negotiated us reestablishing that, hiring a new person. And so people are like, how did you do that? Most people are nervous around talking with presidents. I'm like, but that's a part of that was because I had exposure at Oakwood to allow me to have that student leadership where I'm generally formal and respectful, but I'm not afraid.
Yeah. Cool. So my classmate, Oakwood classmate, Ellis Shepard says it was those sweaters, those Pine Forest Academy sweaters that was so intimidating. I love to see that. I saw it for the first time, I think, as a freshman at Oakwood in college days. They came through there with those sweaters on. Man, they were looking so organized and so confident and so regal. I felt good. I stuck my chest out. So you're right, Ellis. Absolutely, I would agree with you 100%. So, well, thank you for sharing that because really what you said was that you are being who you are. You're just bringing Dr. Sidney to the room, right? And you don't feel the need to shift or change in any way. And but let me ask you this: I'm sure you've encountered racists who will do racist things, and then there are those liberals who major in microaggressions, who you deal with every day and who are killing you and stabbing you in the back, all the while talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. So how do you relate? How do you relate to that dynamic? Quite frankly, I prefer the cat rolling out with the gun in the window, right? I know who he is, I know where he is, I know when to duck, I know how to do whatever. But the liberals, they're annoying and sometimes unavoidable. How do you deal with that?
So one of the things that has been helpful is success in the areas that matter to the institutions, right? So that gives you a certain level of credibility. So I'm at a research, our flagship research institution. And so I could not wear dreads. I could, but I'll say it for the sake of what we're saying. I could not wear dreads. I could not speak with freedom the way that I do, and other things if I was average.
Okay.
That's just the truth.
Okay.
They're not going to listen to someone that is average,
Okay.
right? But I'm doing well above what the expectations are. So let me give you context. So generally, for a person to earn the rank of full professor, you have to become an assistant professor. Then, after 6 or 7 years, you become an associate professor, and then you're observed for another it could 5 to 8 years generally is the range, but it can be longer than that for full professor. I've been here for 5 years. I'm in my 6th year. If everything goes correctly, I will have been named a full professor in March, which will be 5 years and 7 months.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
and so I say that means that you're not they're not going to let a black man with dreads in Moscow, Idaho, even put his name up for that unless he superseded the expectation of what the standard is. And so that, but also listening to other people is really important. And so I was not surprised that Donald Trump won in 2016 by being in Moscow, Idaho, because I'm hearing a diversity of voices, right? I'm hearing voices that are from a rural environment that's conservative, right? And hearing their arguments. So now I can deconstruct their argument and come from a different perspective, but I'm coming in an authentic way.
Okay.
And so for a lot of people, they may not like you, but they respect you, right? I don't agree with you, but I respect where your line of reasoning. And so with working with liberal rights, a lot of it is calling them into account, right? It's like so we're going through something now where we're saying as a Black community on campus that if we're going to make decisions on Black people must be at the table.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And so, but part of that is creating coalition. And so I think that Oakwood was good. And I think in an earlier conversation, earlier conversation today, it kind of brought it out that Oakwood, my work at Oakwood and developing a organization at Oakwood provided me with the leadership foundation in creating coalitions to do that in my professional setting now.
Good. Excellent. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'll bring it up specifically now. In this article that we've been referring to, Striving in the Unfamiliar Place, you talk about your middle school principal, Mrs. Howard, who took you all to a Ivy League school, and there was a black professor or administrator who spoke to you all, and while he spoke, he made some self-deprecating remarks, and your principal leaned over and said to you, "Never do that." And as you explained that, you didn't use the term imposter syndrome, but I want to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
So that was your takeaway. In other words, never be an imposter. And you had the opportunity to speak at Harvard or present at Harvard and at Oxford, right? These quote unquote unfamiliar places. And I think that you have mentioned it a bit, but how does a person who struggle with this, and I think so, it's not only a black issue. Certainly, Latinx students feel that. The research bears that out. So, how do you tell students how to prepare themselves to be resilient and resistant against this concept or notion of the imposter syndrome?
So it's almost like I'm going to answer this in two ways,
Okay.
right? So in one way is prepare, prepare, prepare.
Okay.
And so a part of that, so one of the things that earlier on in my career, I would get nervous before I would have to speak and do things. And I would not necessarily, I would be so full of fear, right? That I would not even practice or rehearse or anything, and then it would be embarrassing to me. Now I do a lot of prep work. So there are people like Eric Thomas, who's a great motivational speaker. Just great speakers that we know and love. That Mr. Kenny Anderson. There's people that are just great orators.
Yeah.
That not only do you study them, but you recognize that although they make it look easy, a part of it is that they have been doing it for over 30 years.
Yes.
They've been honing and
Yes.
working on their craft. So now I've joined Toastmasters. So every Thursday night, Toastmasters is a public speaking guild.
Sure.
And so now I'm speaking on a consistent basis. And so I'm preparing myself for opportunities. So when Dr. Nas asked if I would come on his program, I have had some reps. I've gotten some reps in. And so that helps you. That helps you a lot, just kind of practicing. The other part is, I would say, is knowing who you are, knowing whose you are, and knowing where you're going. And so a part of that, knowing who I am, is I know who I am in God, right? I know that I'm a child of the King. And no matter where I am, right, I'm his child, but I'm also Cassandra and Sidney Freeman Sr.'s son.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm the husband of Dr. Linda Murphy Freeman.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so I know I know where my base is. And I know whose I am, right? And that goes to not only my family, but a broader family outside of just my immediate family. So that's my Oakwood family. That's my Pine Forge family. That's my Black community. And so I know whose I am. And so I don't only represent myself, I represent a broader community. And then lastly, know where I'm going. And so although sometimes it may not seem all the way clear, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Because I'm a part of this opportunity because it hopefully will lead to opportunities to get me where I'm trying to go. So those kinds of principles have helped me to navigate my professional and even personal experiences.
Awesome. Fantastic. Phenomenal. So we've got this COVID reality, COVID existence, this, I call it a global reset that we find ourselves in. And so I would ask you, what have you done during this time to leverage now and better position yourself for the future?
Awesome question. So I one of the things was I leaned into into the opportunities that were made available. So on my campus, even though I had been talking about and issues of race and just higher education issues because that's my area, one of the things that I did was a lot of times your university doesn't recognize you until externally people recognize you.
True.
So I wrote articles around race and in particular anti-blackness, right? So I made sure that I was going to be the expert in the Pacific Northwest on issues of anti-blackness, and so I created a relationship with our media team right here at the university, their apparatus, and so that brings so when you're doing things that people feel are relevant, that kind of provides you with opportunities to serve in other arenas. Another thing that happened was that I had some real questions, some spiritual questions around um, reconciling my faith community, uh, the faith community that I grew up in, and their lack of engagement on issues of social justice and liberation. And so I wanted to, have a panel discussion on the topic of decolonizing the Black Adventist mind. And so, and in some ways, it went viral as having a platform that addressed that issue, and I leaned into that in the sense that there were others that were supportive of the work that we were doing, and said, let's partner together and even grow the platform, because there are many people that feel the same way. They want sovereign ministries that may not be attached to a denominational structure, but is seeking truth. And so, and it was in alignment with my own questions of what would God have me do at this time. And so, just taking advantage of opportunities that avail themselves even in these times, praying about it, but moving towards it. May not know have all the I's dotted and T's crossed, but moving forward into the opportunity.
Hey man, outstanding. Yeah, because everybody looking for free Negroes. Hey, they might not want to talk around the water cooler with you for fear of being associated with you, but they're looking for the free Negroes that can show them the way, that can help them to understand, articulate, process what they're going through. Folks are feeling imprisoned and emotionally incarcerated and systemically oppressed, and they want to. Who where's the free Negro thought think tank, so that we get some insight? And this is one of the things that, I mean, I can't say this enough, that really happened in this moment. Yeah. I saw so many conversations that challenged white Adventist theology, right? And the Black Adventists who practice it. And this never would have happened at this level, both with yourself and others who've been on panels and platforms. Dr. Crichton, who you know well, is a good he's a good friend of mine, but also my classmate both at Oakwood and Andrews, and his journey started with us together in his apartment by me asking him, "Why is that white Christ up on your wall?" And so right now, he's writing a book on white pathology, right? So trying to help us to better understand what is this phenomenon that we are seeing that causes a person traumatized to perpetrate trauma. Yes. for external, visual, and observable reasons. I applaud you in what you've done, and I think that God is using you in a powerful way as a thought leader to help us to navigate this and to be critical and to look at other ways of doing it. Uh, and many people know I've been a free Negro for some time, and I thank God for it. And God knows the path and the journey He has all of us on. Right? One would ask, well, what in the world would you have needed all of that Adventist education for Academy and Oakwood and Andrews if you would ultimately end up independent? I say, well, I'm not questioning God, but I leverage and use it all.
Right.
I leverage and use it all. So you had a. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Could I jump in? I one of the things I want to make sure I don't miss is that this walk though is lonely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I want to talk about that because so I didn't mention this earlier on. I missed saying this, but so one of the challenges of being here is that when you're here, it's just like what you do. You learn how to navigate it. You've adjusted to it. But let's say I fly out to LA. I'm at LAX and I'm there. And I'm in LA, and then I get up with Black folks. It's so good to see Black folks, right?
Yeah.
And most Black folks that are in these urban spots, they see other Black folks, right? And so I'm excited.
Right.
I'm excited to link up and think. And the Black folks are kind of like, okay, we can,
what's wrong with
you? or we're Dr. Nas and. Is we're friends on Facebook. I'm feeling like, listen, we should just link up. Right. And Dr. Nas is like, okay, well, we know each other from Facebook, but it's not not the same as like we grew up together.
It ain't like that.
And so right. And so you're navigating. I'm just being honest and just sharing kind of those feelings, right?
Sure.
So there's been times where I've gone into like Black Adventist spaces. Right. And where I'm so excited, like let's say I fly to Chicago and I'm maybe doing a lecture or something, but I'm trying to stay over the weekend so I can go to a Black church and connect with other Black people. And then the church is cold. And you're saying, what's going on? I'm so happy to be in a Black church, to hear be in communion with Black people. And so I think that's something we have to navigate. And we also see this in the pandemic, right? People, their personalities are changing. I often say that in some ways, my wife's personality is coming closer to mine, and my personality is coming closer to hers. And we're all trying to adjust to kind of these changes that are happening in society and informing our lives. And so when not only are you experiencing that in an unfamiliar place, but you are an activist, those things can be lonely. And so that's why it's so important, yes, to have your relationship with Christ, but have other kinds of outlets and ways in which you blow off steam and ways in which you are affirmed, because the crowd may affirm you and say rah 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 on as it relates to you're saying it as far as decolonizing the mind and stuff like that. But then when you go to DC, right? You go to DC and you see them and they're acting kind of funny, and you're saying, huh? Why are they acting funny? But because I think, Dr. Nas, you were saying something interesting about how when you are a social justice warrior, in some ways they don't want to talk to you next to it's almost like they like the girl, but they like the girl in the around the corner, not want to hold hands with you.
Right, right,
And so
right.
so so that was something that I had to kind of mentally process and
Yeah.
still processing.
Yeah, good, good. Brother Earl Jones has got a new book. He's entitled "Finding the Free Negro."
I like that.
He just put that on the Facebook feed. Well, that's exciting. Now, if you're on the feed and you've got a question for Dr. Freeman, please put it in the chat, and we want to get to that. Want to ask your questions of him so that you can have any feedback that you'd like to have. And while you're doing that, your mentor, Dr. Nate or Nat Irvin from the University of Louisville, told
Mm-hmm.
you about two tests that
Mm-hmm.
help you really know who your friends are, your real friends are. And tell us
Right.
about the two tests and tell us why they're significant to you.
Yes. So one day I was talking to him, and there was a moment where I had a friend from college, and we're like, we're going to be lifelong friends, but he had a traumatic family experience, and so we would talk every day, but then it kind of fell off, and so that was kind of hard for me because somebody that you talk with every day, it's kind of um, it was hard to kind of adjust, and but even with that, I was talking to my mentor about friends on campus and things like that. He said, "Who are your friends on campus?" Right? And so I paused, and he said, "Let me ask you this." He said, "How many of their homes have you been in?"
Hmm.
I said, "Wow." I said, maybe one. He said, "If people don't let you essentially into their sacred space, right, into their home, their inner sanctum,
Mm.
then if you're talking about a core friend, not kind of like you're affiliated with them or things like that, then they're not really your friend."
Hmm.
Um, and so that was
So,
important.
so, so you've been getting a lot of invitations to eat popcorn and applesauce.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, and well, in COVID now you really don't people really show you. So what you'll find is you'll have people who were they're friends with you when they're in a same or similar situation,
Right,
but they're not necessarily your friends just to be your friend,
right, right,
right?
for
And
sure.
so that was hard.
Yeah. So that's number one. Real
Mhm.
friends invite you into their sacred spaces. What's number two?
I'm trying to remember if it
24,
was
48 hours.
yes. So um and this is actually more of my test, right? So there are friends that I call, right? And let's say they can't come to the phone right then, right?
Uh huh.
What they'll do, they'll text me and say, got your call, man. I'm in a meeting. Are you okay? You're cool, right? And if everything's good, well, let's catch up in a couple hours or whatever the case may be,
Right,
right?
right.
Those are your friends. People that call you back 5 days later or don't call you and you got to chase them down. They
Right.
not they not. So I mean, we're talking when I'm talking about your friends that are your three friends that you can call in the midnight hour. That's what
Yeah,
I'm.
yeah,
That's what I'm talking when you have to go to the garden,
yeah,
right, and
yeah,
pray.
yeah,
They're the
yeah.
ones with you, and so
Right.
God has blessed me with a couple of those, but you value. I've learned to value those friendships
Mm-hmm.
very much because people don't. I used to have the kind of disposition where people should do certain things, right? And maybe they should, but they have the option not to. So you
Mm-hmm.
just appreciate when people do are nice.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you say that because I have friends who I know they love me. I know they appreciate me. I know they're my best friend. But if we're not in the same space, you know, they're not as there is no sense of urgency.
Mm.
There is no sense of urgency. But when we're in the same space, I get their complete, undivided attention, devotion, and everything. And what I came to discover over time is that it's a wiring issue, right? And so
Mm.
some people are wired for higher levels of engagement, higher levels of intentionality regarding engagement, and others
Oh
are
yeah.
not so much. So at first, I was a little offended before I came to understand that and say, wow, I mean, I'm really invested. I always got to call, I
Right.
always got to make the contact, and they just kind of wait. And but I discovered that everybody doesn't have that. So the spirit will often speak to me and tell me to call people. Some that I call
Yeah.
frequently, and some that I don't. And I find myself being obedient to that spirit. I mean, I just like to talk to people anyway.
Right.
But I do that, and I really became more sympathetic and more understanding about that. But I do think you're on to something, because some of those same people I have put in my text, it's urgent, and they've
Hmm.
responded,
Right.
right? So, so there is a lapse there in terms of their urgency to support me, or their ability to do that and get back to whatever else they were doing. Because some people can't turn off or shift, and I have very good friends who are just like that. I'd be like, dude, it's like 48 hours after I texted you. Sometimes there's no response because after 24 they forget,
Right.
and the text
Well,
gets pushed down.
there's also the times when, so for me, it's like when, let's say I fly to, um I'll use LA, right? I'll fly to LA, and what I had to understand is the cultural difference of regions, right? So what'll happen is, so when I fly um to LA, I'm like, I may say, I'm gonna use you again, Dr. Nas. Let's link up. Well, you're thinking, well, I'm in Fontana. The traffic is going to be this. You're going through all your mind. You may want to get up with me, right? But you're saying I got to get through traffic. Da
Yeah,
da da da.
yeah.
So so for me, right, being in Moscow, Idaho,
Hmm.
right, this is a major thing to see Dr. Nas, right? That's
Huge.
kind of,
That's
that would
right.
make my whole day.
That's
That
right.
mean we would take off work
That's
and
right.
say
You
I'm
traverse
getting with.
land and sea. Huh?
Right. So for instance, if you come to Spokane, Washington, and you don't have to be my best friend, but you say I'm going to be in Spokane, Washington. I'm going to drive up an hour and a half. Oh, to just get up with another good brother, right? Whereas the same urgency may not be there if you're in LA. So I had to understand, even with family, you had to understand that,
That's
right?
right.
So when you come to town, you're like, and they're asking you, can you come across town? I'm saying, I came across the country. Why am I got to go across town
Right.
to see you? So
Right.
there's always that
Right.
kind of understanding,
Right.
even cultures and regions, given where people are,
Right.
uh, how to
Yeah.
navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something. Yeah, and that's a real thing. But I have friends, childhood friends, who like within 2 hours of where I live, your money is no good. You cannot stay in a hotel. You cannot eat at a
Mm,
restaurant. It's on me.
right.
And so you cannot rent a car, whatever. It's on me. And so, you just got those kinds of folks. And everything has to do with your family origin, how you were socialized, so forth and so on. All right, so we're getting down to an end. So, one of your favorite quotes you say is that from Maya Angelou. It says, "When people tell you who they are, believe them." What
Yeah.
do you, what do you mean? What do you mean, and what do you understand her to be by that?
Yeah. So it's important that that sometimes we ignore. When I was younger, I would ignore kind of, uh, I don't know if you want to call it spirit, airs, whatever you want to call it, but essentially people are letting you know with body language or or when they've blown you off, or different things. They're telling you what you mean to them. And so sometimes we ignore that because we want so much for a particular type of relationship, or for them to partner with you, or whatever the case may be. And so as I get older now, I recognize that generally people let you know, whether it's verbal or not, whether they're interested in partnering with you, or they value you in different ways. So when people do something that hurts you or is not for your good, believe that. Believe that. And say, listen, there's other people. What I'm learning is there's people uh, that are attracted to Sidney Freeman, and they love what I'm doing. And sometimes we're looking for validation from certain people, right? And then there's other people, like I said, you may be looking for someone to pick up the phone, a certain person to pick up the phone, but you may have another friend that you wouldn't have necessarily put as high of a premium on, and they pick up the phone every time you call.
Right.
And so you start saying, as you get older, you start saying, well, I need to invest. Let me pour into this person rather than trying to track down this other person. When I see them, we can still be cool, cordial,
Right.
But my investment is in people that can hopefully that I can pour into, and they can pour into me.
Sure. Excellent. So you've been hosting these panels, the decolonization or decolonizing of the Adventist mind, and we've watched with particular interest. And Dr. Rita Mercer said she's grateful for you doing that. She said that on Facebook.
Wonderful.
And appreciate that. And I'm appreciative of it too. I've heard at least two of the panels by now, and we're introduced to other liberated minds as well. And so I don't know if your creation or establishment of the liberation movement started before that, as a result of that, or just what. But I want to ask you, what do you hope to accomplish with the liberation movement? What's your mission values, values, and what do you see yourself doing with that, and how can people help you with that?
Wonderful. Thank you for that question. So it actually came about with just questions that I had in August. I was talking with the founder of Adventists for Social Justice, Dr. Tiffany Llewellyn, and I said, what platform could I use because used to discuss decolonizing the Black Adventist mind? I have some questions I want to ask, and people that I want to ask it to. So at that time, I had been on multiple panels. I was one on the circuit like others were doing, but I had my own questions.
Right.
Because I hadn't heard other people address these questions. And she said, why don't you start your own platform? And she challenged me. So I hadn't thought of having my own platform. I just was going to, get on somebody else's platform. And so I reached out to another person who would from time to time have these kind of online discussions. And he said, a lot of people are using StreamYard. So I got the free version of StreamYard and was going to try to use StreamYard to ask these questions. I reached out to some people that I respect, and they respected my work to have this discussion. And the Sunday before we were going to have the decolonizing first panel, I reached out to someone that I knew kind of had facilitated similar things, just to ask his advice on how to navigate it. And they said, listen, we would help support what you're doing. And the rest is history. So the infrastructure, that person brought the infrastructure to what we were doing. And after that, we had others that came. They were so blessed by the ministry that uh, they wanted to support it and expand it. That's why we have a nice clear camera here and lights in the back. All of those things kind of came out of that. So but you're going to the core of kind of the mission and the values and things of that nature. And so our mission is to help liberate people that liberate our people, right? That liberate them in multiple ways, whether it's psychologically, spiritually, socially, and if for those who feel that they are already liberated, having a forum, creating a forum in which they can build on where they are. And so we have interest in creating an educational platform in which to support that growth. And so we're in the midst of our 501c3 process is pending. Mm-hmm. And so we're in the midst of that.
Good.
And we have some T-shirts and other things that are functioning as a fundraiser for the work that we are doing. So you can find out more about us at DrSydneyFreemanJr.com. Again, it's DrSydneyFreemanJr.com. And when you get on the website, you actually can click on the Liberation Movement tab, and on that tab you will have ways in which you can donate. There's about 3 different ways you can donate, and then you can access and support our cause by buying a T-shirt online in the same space. You also there can access more than 30 videos of original content around the decolonizing theme. Mm-hmm. What you'll see here is the liberation movement is the over the umbrella organization, and decolonization is a initiative within the broader organization.
Okay, good. I understand that. I appreciate that, and we definitely appreciate you. And I think Errol Jones is saying, I will support both of your efforts with strategic planning, marketing, and financing. So we're going to call Errol.
Wonderful.
We're going to get on a conference call with Errol tonight. How about that?
See, that's the kind of person I like.
That's right. I mean, and I try to do that when I see people online saying things, whatever. I reach out to them, asking how I can be helpful, because as the Spirit leads, obviously. So thank you for that, Brother Errol. We appreciate you. And then my classmate Tammy Best says this is an important topic, but my first time hearing of Dr. Freeman. Oh, girl, where you been?
Wow.
And but I will definitely inquire more. Make sure you go to Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr. .com. And man, I want to tell you, you got one of the flyest websites ever.
Oh.
Everything you've done in your life is on there, right?
Oh, yeah,
I think your kindergarten diploma is on there. Your speech that you made in first grade. But it's really good, very organized. There's no question about what article you're reading, looking at, accessing. The links are there. Very easy. And so I really appreciate that. You really modeled how to do that. So if anybody's looking to put together an academic website in that way, go see Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr.'s website, and you will find it there. It is one of the best I've ever seen. So I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Could I jump in? Just 2 things. One is I would ask that those who are on Facebook go to my public page, Sidney Freeman Jr., and within that page, you can go to the group, the Liberation Movement community. We're building a community continue our discussions around this decolonizing theme. And so we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of those who are interested in that particular topic, on that particular topic.
Excellent.
And also, this is the other thing I wanted to say is that I believe in doing things with excellence.
Yes.
But I'm not a perfectionist.
Good.
So there are some people that are everything has to be perfect.
Right.
I just believe that that you need to do things that represent yourself well, represent your God well, and your family.
Amen.
And so I try to model that, whether it's my website or my writing or any of those other things.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, Brother Tim Austin, our guest from last week, says, excellent interview. You too. Iron sharpens iron. Thank you very much. And I think Brother Torrance is asking if you have a Liberation Movement Facebook page.
Yes. So what you do is when you go to the Sidney Freeman Jr. Public page, not my personal not my personal page,
okay,
but my public page. The Liberation Movement is a group within that site.
Okay. All right. And do this for me if you would. Go back to if you would, after you get off, go onto Facebook and you put everything you just said so that folks can find you in the ways that you just suggested.
Yeah. So if I could just say this. So what you would do is say Facebook.com/Sidney Freeman Jr.
Okay.
It's as easy as that.
Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got it. Okay. All right, my brother, I appreciate you so much, learned so much about you and your work and your scholarship, and just thank God for you. And I know God is just getting started with you. You've done so much in a short period of time, and I know the best is yet to come. You've got some books in you and a whole lot of other things that God is going to do through you. So you be blessed, and thanks again for taking your time out to be with us on today. And we look forward to having you back on another time. You take care.
Right,
God
thank you
bless
so much.
Hanging out in that unfamiliar place. And we'll keep you in our prayers.
Thank
All righty. Fantastic. Well, we do thank God for that opportunity to share with our good brother there. And we are going to just share with you a little bit about what just some keys, final thoughts to take away as we leave this space. So Dr. Freeman talked about 3 keys for thriving in an unfamiliar place. 3 keys for operating in an unfamiliar place. And he said that number 1, knowing who you are. Number 2, knowing whose you are. Number 3, knowing what you want to become. And very, very, very powerful, that which he said there. And Tam, help me. I'm trying to get the single speaker. And so if you think about that, God has historically been sending people into unfamiliar places, right? So you think about Abraham, Anna, Daniel, Deborah, Moses, Joshua, Esther, Jonah, Jesus coming to earth. And in each instance, these individuals went into unfamiliar places, unfamiliar territories, so to speak, right? And really just powerful. And even if you think in more contemporary times, Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Viola Liuzzo, and Goodman Swarner and Cheney, Malcolm X, and Joseph Sinquay, Kwame Nkrumah, and you and me, right? We're often challenged, and like Dr. Freeman said, God needs us to go, right? And God, like Moses, God calls us to go because God has a particular thing that he wants to do in us and through us. And so it is not the place. Sometimes it's too cold. Sometimes it's too hot. Sometimes there's too few black people, too few theaters and cultural and social outlets and whatever have you, but we really got to listen to God to see where we're supposed to be in a given time frame. Because there's what we call the Kairos moment. That is a moment in which God has divinely appointed something in your life to do, and everything matters that you move when God is telling you to move at that time, at that moment, kind of like the troubling of the waters, right? You can't come back 2 days, a week later after fasting and prayer. You kind of have to get an insight and hear and feel God and sense God and move with the move of God. So who are you? Knowing who you are, that's understanding your calling and your purpose and your strengths and your wiring. That helps you to go to that place and then to thrive in that place, knowing whose you are. He talked about knowing God, that you are God's, that God called you, and if God be for you, who can be against you, right? Understanding that God is in it, and God, if God takes you to it, He's going to bring you through it. Understanding that God is not a liar. He's not going to leave you, nor is He going to forsake you. He's going to be with you. And so understanding that, and then understanding that God will make a way and make the provision. Understanding that you have family, your nuclear family, your extended family, your school family, your church family, your tribe, your black community. Understand that they will be there to support, and understand who you have who are working with you. Who's working with you? Who's talking to you? Who's supporting you? You got haters, right? They smile in your face and cut you in the back, right? And they don't help you fulfill your purpose. But just understanding whose you are, who do you belong to, and who belongs to you, is going to help you in that unfamiliar place. Remember, all of those people operated in very unfamiliar and sometimes dangerous spaces. But you've got to understand what God has called you to. And then lastly, who you will become. So when we answer the call of God on our lives, we decide and agree to participate in sanctification. So we've moved past justification into the space of sanctification, and God is doing a good work that He says He won't stop it until He finishes it at the day of Jesus Christ. So part of moving into this unfamiliar place, be it an actual place or being in a new mental space or doing a new thing that we've never done before, doing a new job, starting a new profession, starting a new business, whatever it is, it's new and it's unfamiliar, and be willing to do it because it's actually part of your sanctification and growth process because God is doing a work. Then I would say it's prophetic participation, right? Because there's some things that God knew about you already. God's eternal. He knew you before you were born. He numbers the hairs on your head, right? So He understands that. So prophetic participation. So understanding there is a prophetic call on your life, moving in it and working with it to the extent that we collaborate with the co-creation, right? We are collaborating with our co-creative process. So we are working with God. We are co-laborers with God, and we're doing what God is trying to do in the earth realm instead of fighting God. We understand that we're part of a process. We understand that there takes preparation. We understand that we've got potential. There's progress, personal development, and it's all about your purpose, your raison d'etre, your reason for existence, God's call on your life, God's purpose. There is a reason why you didn't die stillborn. There's a reason why you weren't aborted. There's a reason why you're not dead. There's a reason why you're here right now, right? And God wants to use you powerfully in this moment in familiar and unfamiliar places. So my message is clear and simple. Don't despise unfamiliar places because God is doing a work in you so that He can do a work through you for the glory of God. All right, let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for this time we've had together just to share with our good friend, Dr. Sidney Freeman. We thank you for all that you've done, all that you've poured into him and out of him to be a blessing in the academic community, but also in the church community. We continue to ask that you would bless him in his efforts there at the University of Idaho, his wife, God, and all that you put in his hand to do. And then, oh God, we pray for those who who are struggling with their identity, struggling with their purpose, struggling with the call of God on their life, maybe even struggling with the geographic place that they find themselves in. And we pray that you'll give them strength and the focus and the understanding. Give them a glimpse of what you've called them to do in this season, your purpose, your plan. I thank you, Lord. And I pray, God, that you'll keep us during this time as so many are dying and the cases and the death toll is rising. And we pray, oh God, that you'd be with our healthcare workers and our first responders and the hospitals that are being overrun. I pray that you'd keep our bodies, God, from disease and sickness, COVID related and COVID unrelated. I thank you, Lord, and I declare the blood of Jesus over each of us and ask that the angels that excel in strength would keep us. We thank you, Lord, for hearing and answering these prayers in the name of Jesus. And also, please remember, next week, Dr. Milton Brown will be with us, physician scientist, and he will talk to us on the subject, will a vaccine be enough? Will a vaccine be enough? Follow us on social media at Rainbow Community. Subscribe on YouTube and support us at Cash App and Venmo. Thank you so much for being with us today and joining the Sabbath show. Until next week, God bless you.